AVC John here, second video in a week. Second one inspired by one of Brett's, and this one is about this book, Facing the Other Way, the story of 4AD, and that's 4AD Records by Martin Aston. Brett reviewed the book and I decided to buy it. When I first looked on Amazon, it was out of stock, which I thought was a bit odd for a new book. Looked on eBay and some joker was asking £160 for it. Obviously recognised there was some problem with the back orders, so I went back to Amazon, placed it on order, and it came quicker than I expected. 4AD have always been there while I've been buying music and been interested in music from the very early 80s, and always synonymous, in fact two halves really, synonymous with the Cocteau Twins for the first half and American bands for the second half for me. And it made me review my record collection. In fact, it made me go out and buy some records that I didn't have after having read about them in here. And I just want to talk about that because there's a few different issues. This is sophisticated stuff here that I'm linking script. Initially, it made me think about the artwork of Vaughan Oliver and the Cocteau Twins, and there has been a debate on Facebook about art doesn't make a good album better. I don't agree with that. I think a good album musically is enhanced by the artwork. What it can't do is make a bad album better. So if it is a bad album, you need to give it a good cover, and I'll show you ones that I think fall into that category in a moment. But firstly, you know, I started listening to a lot of the Cocteau Twins, starting with Garlands, which doesn't get a particularly good write-up in there, I don't think, but I think it's pretty good. Head Over Heels, there's Treasure. I haven't got all the Cocteau Twins albums, that's Bluebell Knoll, especially the latest stuff, Heaven or Las Vegas, which happens to be my favourite, and a couple of 12-inch singles there. And I was really interested because it made me realise I got records in the collection that don't even fall into the category, that I didn't even realise were on 4AD. The one thing that did strike me is that the younger Robin Guthrie, and he doesn't really atone for that, doesn't come out of this very well, and it's non-judgmental. It just sort of states facts, and I think he seems like a bit of a brat really, but I'll let you read that for yourself. And sort of quite badly behaved, bullying, controlling character. I don't know the guy at all. He might not be like that, but that's just how it seems if you sort of judge his behaviour. The artwork's the really interesting thing for me, and the point I was making, I looked through my collection and realised that I didn't even realise some things were on 4AD, as I say, and one of them is an album I don't particularly like, I have to say. I mean, it's okay, and it's this Ultra Vivid Scene, but it's an absolutely superb cover. I think it's textured, it's like that gaffer tape that's got a toothbrush, really high quality inner, but it's just a bit of a boring album, so thus proving that you can't make it an average album great or better. I actually prefer Staring at the Sun, the 12-inch single I've got there. The other 4AD albums that I unearthed were these. The first Birthday Party album. This is actually recorded in, a bit unusual really, but it's sort of pre-Cocteau Twins, recorded in Australia, I think Sydney actually. And this is just a riot from start to finish. I mean, this is just a superb album, but you know, it's not for the faint-hearted. If you want a quiet night in, this isn't the one to have it in with. These two are, that's a 12-inch single, and this is Spooky by Lush, classic Stargazing, late 80s, and you know, completely synonymous with that sound and the artwork, and I think it's a great album with a superb cover. It smells nice as well, which is always a bit of a fetish I've got. Then others, we've got the Moonlight and the Melodies, Harold Budd, Elizabeth Fraser, Robin Guthrie, Simon Raymond. There's a comment by Robin Guthrie in there which is derogatory about this album, and just goes to show the sort of frame of mind he was in at the time, because it's just not true. This is as good a Cocteau Twins album as I think there is. This is one of the surprises. This is Le Mystère des Voix Bulgares, and it's Bulgarian, can't remember, open breathing style of singing, and this is Haunting, and I didn't even realise it was on 4AD until I read about it in the book, and then remembered that I got it. This is another one. It was interesting because it's the Pale Saints, but this is one that was issued through a chain of records that was in the UK called Chain with No Name, quite short-lived really, and this one's got a series of postcards in there, which I'll just show you, and that was exclusive to the Chain with No Name, which is what that sticker says on the front. So as you can see, all Vaughan Oliver artwork. Then the albums, there was one of the albums that I actually went out and bought as a consequence of reading about it in there, was the third This Mortal Coil album. I had the first two, Filigree and Shadow and It'll End in Tears. Both, what can you say about these? It hasn't already been said. Song to the Siren is often thought of as being a Cocteau Twins song for people not in the know, but it's not. It's one of Ivo's studio project, and there's a clear progression for the three This Mortal Coil albums until you get to Blood. I got this for a bit of a bargain. It goes for between £20 and £30, but I happened to be at home one day working and looked on eBay and spotted it there and bought it for £13. I think that included the postage as well, and I paid for it immediately, and it came the next day, which is great. It's a superb double album. I'd recommend it to anybody, and I think it is as good as any. All the three This Mortal Coil albums are quite different, and all represent the sort of frame of mind Ivo was in at the time, and the artists. Shelley Ann Orphan, the singer from there, I can't quite remember her name off the top of my head. She sings on the third album, and then if you buy no other 4AD record, and you have only money for one, buy this one, Lonely as an Eyesore, because I'll just read out some of the bands that it's got on there. It's got the Cocteau Twins, This Mortal Coil, Clan of Zymox, Dead Can Dance, Throwing Muses, Div Juice, Colourbox, and Colourbox are an unusual one of the early bands, and not what you might expect. So that almost sums up the first half of the 4AD story for me, and then the American bands came along, and Ivo did actually eventually move to America, and it coincided with me starting to buy albums on CD. So I got both the Belly albums. I think that's Tanya Donnelly's band. I think it's actually an awful name for a band. I think it's one of those words that's slightly more vulgar in English than it is in American English. There's the first album, Star, and the second album, King. You can see the artwork on King still is very much in the vein of the earlier stuff, and I'd love to have that on a vinyl copy of that. I've never seen one. I've actually been able to pick up Belly in the meantime, and it's so much better than the CD cover, and that to me, that almost is one of the things that is missing from this book, because it never dwells upon the move to any great extent from 12-inch 12 by 12 for a vinyl record, and then the decisions that had to be made. There's a lot later in the book about multiple formats trying to drive sales, but not about what the thought process was behind them changing to the much smaller format. I mean, other things that I picked up on the way were Doolittle, and then the series of soul albums, two by Kristen Hirsch, and love songs for, I don't remember what that's called properly, love songs for underdogs. And it's when you start looking at this you realise how much better the art is associated with a vinyl album, and to me, it reaches its nadir. Well, you can tell sort of it's 4AD, but that's just dreadful. There's nothing in that. Christian Hirsch's The Grotto. So I've also got a few on vinyl. I've got Dizzy by Three Muses, Red Heaven, that's a really nice copy actually. That's an original issue. And then I bought recently the reissue of my favourite Pixies album, which it's not very controversial, it's slightly controversial, which is Bossa Nova, which I prefer to Doolittle. But again, in the traditional 4AD artwork, I think that is an example of a great album made better by great artwork. And then there's the post, really many senses, that 4AD should have come to an end when Ivo left, because it did have to change. It had been going downhill for many years and actually was resurrected by his departure, because they then reinvigorated themselves. And I've only got one example, I've got a couple of examples, but they're not on 4AD. So, and I've not gone into the reason why they're not on 4AD, but they're now considered 4AD artists, and that's Grimes and Bon Hiver, which is from the French Bon Hiver, meaning good winter. And the only vinyl example I've got, which is actually on the 4AD label, is this Camera Obscura, which is a Christmas single. So you see that's called Swans, with the Blizzard on the B-side. And that, I think, although I've not gone through my whole collection of 2,000 plus albums to try to identify if there are any gaps missing, is my entire 4AD collection. The biggest surprising fact that I read in here was that there was one song which made #1, and it's the only 4AD song that I believe has been to #1, and that was Pump Up the Volume by Mars, which was pretty much a studio project. And this was 20 plus years ago when he went to #1, and at the time I thought it was absolutely rubbish, and now I still think it's absolutely rubbish, completely non-representative of the 4AD label. So that is my 4AD collection. I'm always on the lookout for them. They do stand out usually with the artwork, but I'm not really interested in anything that's post-Ivo, and I'm particularly interested in anything that's pre-1990. So it's always one of those things that it's great if it pops up at a record fair. So that's it, VC, second video of the week. Hope you're doing well, and take care.